For 4 years, I attended Mount Pisgah Academy, as I've shared, and my twin brother and I worked in a nursing home. My wife and not my wife then, but Tina and Tanya also worked there as twins, and we also had a twins that were older named Annis and Janice. And this is just a side thing, but what's interesting is that half the twins, you know what I mean? If you split the twins down the middle, half the twins worked on 200 wing, half the twins worked on 100 wing. So those poor residents must have thought they were losing their minds at times. Jamie and I, my twins, started out in the kitchen, working there for a year. Messy job, but we acquired in our sophomore summer a license to be certified nursing assistants, CNAs we called them. And Tina and Tanya did too. Jamie and Tanya worked on 200, Tina and I worked on 100. And in that job, we would, of course, assist with feeding, with bathing, dressing, basically the whole deal. I remember feeding a resident one night, and as I was feeding her, across the way there was a little lady named Sarah. Sarah, I don't know her story. I just know that Sarah was having a dispute with her roommate. Each room had 2 beds for the most part. And she was having a dispute. And in the midst of the argument, which sounded as though it was pretty much one-sided, Sarah doing all the talking, she said, "I have no family." And I really don't remember what else she said. But to hear this little lady who was, I don't know, maybe in her 80s, with just her meager belongings in this little corner of a room, and to hear her cry out in frustration, "I have no family." Even though I was young with all my future ahead of me, it was sobering to say the least and heart-wrenching. I remember another lady there. Her name was Gladys. Very petite, thin lady. They say that she modeled coats, like fur coats and so forth on the runway in New York City. Wow, that impressed me. But you would have never known. You see, Gladys only had one leg now and was dependent on us for her care. After graduation in '95, I took a job in Ohio during my freshman year in college. I went on to serve as a caretaker for a 92-year-old Jewish gentleman named John. I remember sitting with him in his high-rise apartment. He had plenty of money, so I thought anyways. He was a retired lawyer, practiced into his early 80s, said he had to step out because he couldn't argue with a woman. Had earned a reputation in the community. He had a family, a beautiful family, sweet, sweet family. But he had lost his wife, Sylvia. All of this, and yet his life, as it was drawing to a close, he seemed depressed and somewhat unhappy at times. In my young mind, I thought, well, if money, beautiful family, a lovely wife, though gone, still a wife, traveled the world, or so it sounded, and he still wasn't really happy. What's left? This morning, I'd like to invite you to join me to look at a message from a preacher that lived a long time ago. He calls himself a preacher anyways, though most of us know him more as a king. This preacher king takes a few pages to write out a memoir, some reflection on his experience, and in the process gives counsel to people like you and me. You can almost sense in his words this sense of anguish, of sorrow, of being on the other side of this story and realizing that the pages are few that are left in his, and feeling a sense of remorse, of shame, and perhaps if someone will listen to his story, they can avoid the same traps that he fell into. Of course, if you haven't figured it out, I'm speaking of the wise man Solomon, who wrote 3 of our Bible books, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon. A book on love, a book on life, and a book on wisdom. Today we want to look at his third work, or at least what we understand to be his last work, which was Ecclesiastes. We can't be certain as to when Proverbs was written, and we think of Song of Solomon, the way it reads, as something that probably came early in his reign. But we understand that the book of Ecclesiastes was likely near the end. A lot has happened during these 40 years of his reign. During this period, he was given wealth, he was given wisdom, yet he still desired more. He gathered unto himself more wealth, though God had warned about such behaviors. He gathered numerous women unto himself for his pleasure, as well as for political means, yet we know that sadly backfired. He taxed the people to help pay for his lavish lifestyle, which he had created, and yet this also caused much trouble. Somewhere along the line, he realizes he gets his folly, And as we gather from the book of Ecclesiastes, he repents and turns back to God. If there was ever a man who did it all, who had it all, Solomon would fit the bill. Prior to his death, this experienced king writes these words to you and to me in hopes that we will learn from his failure. The title of the message this morning, hear it carefully, Happiness by Faith. Happiness by faith. Let us pray. Dear Lord, I pray that you speak to our hearts. Hide me behind your glory. May we all sit at your feet. May we listen to this wise preacher who once lived such a lavish lifestyle, who had what seemed to be everything. And knowing that you gave him wisdom, Lord, that you've protected this book, this work, this memoir of sorts to be here in our Bible today. Well, we take that as a directive from you that these words contain wisdom for us. Would you help us to comprehend them and, more importantly, to apply them? By the presence of your Holy Spirit, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. The word Ecclesiastes is actually Greek. In its origin, it means preacher. In Proverbs, Solomon is the wise counselor. In Song of Songs, he's the romantic lover. And in Ecclesiastes, he's the aged preacher. He refers to himself as a preacher from the onset in verse 1. Notice with me how the book reads. Open your Bibles to Ecclesiastes. It's nestled between his 2 other works, Proverbs and Song of Solomon. And I want you to notice how he begins his work there in verse 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What profit has a man, he writes, from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? So at the very outset, he writes what appears to be the most bleak and dismal reflection on life that we could conceive of. He says, vanity of vanity, all, not some, not what comes later in life, not what's early, all is vanity. This term vanity is used 37 times in the book. The phrase is referred to when talking about life under the sun. And when it's used to refer to life under the sun, it's used 29 times. Both are important terms. When he says vanity of vanities, he's emphasizing his point. In the Old Testament, this was common fare. We would say the Holy of Holies to refer to the holiest of places. We would say King of Kings to refer to the Supreme King, or Song of Songs to refer to the greatest song known to man. Hence today we are looking at what Solomon calls vanity of vanities. That is, life under the sun. The term in Hebrew can be translated as vapor, breath, or futility. We might say meaninglessness, as some of your translations do. I want you to think of it this way. Vapor, or could we just simply say smoke? if you were to try to reach out and grab a handful of smoke, you would find it, while it would seem to make sense that such could happen, you realize it cannot be contained. Try as you might, it slips through your fingers. You can't tell where it goes. It just evaporates. It's just vapor. We might ask, I should say, that how is it that this preacher who's saying that life is meaningless could find his way into Scripture? How can such a book be a part of such a holy canon? Such sentiments are hardly Christian, right? Some would argue that such writing is merely the philosophies of an aged king. After all, he appears to be giving his views on life. The whole text at some level can seem somewhat secular, like something you might pick up in the self-help section of Barnes & Noble's. However, God has preserved this piece for us for a reason. God has a message for us in this book. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. If you want the wisdom of man, go down to the local library. If you want the wisdom of God, pick up the Holy Library, which has as one of its books this very piece. The message here is from God, and the careful reader will discern it. Now, I want you to notice how Solomon states his premise again in verses 2 and 3. Vanity of vanity, says the preacher. Vapor of vapors, you see? Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. All is smoke, if you will. What profit has a man from all his labor in which he toils under the sun? Now, just at the outset, I'm going to tell you this, just so you can kind of get a feel of the outline of the book, okay? In chapters 1 and 2, he basically gives you the whole premise of his sermon. He lays it out, 4 key points. We're going to look at those. 4 key points, which he introduces in chapters 1 and 2, and then he goes back and he expounds upon through chapter 10. Nice outline, right? And then at the end, in chapters 11 and 12, he brings it together. He brings to the conclusion of the matter, and he responds to these 4 premises, or 4 situations of which we will look through now. After having said that vanity of vanity, all is vanity, he goes on to explain why in his verses following this is the case. In the first several verses, he goes back and adds support for his reasons in the remaining chapters until he reaches his conclusion, as I said. So first, he states that life is meaningless. That's point number 1. Life is meaningless. This sermon you've got to listen to the end, because if not, it's rather dismal. There's something sobering, isn't there, about growing up. Now, when you're young, you think it's the grandest thing. You think, if only I could get to the finish line. If only I could be 23 or 22. If only I could have my own car. If only I could have that beautiful wife or handsome husband. As a child, you want to be older and bigger. Yet give yourself 20, 30 years, and you want to be younger and smaller. Right? We start out as babies. And I say this with sensitivity, but it's just the fact. We start out as babies wearing diapers and sleeping a lot. And yet many end up, do they not? Wearing Depends and sleeping a lot. And it may be rather, that's interesting. Just wait. Just wait. Having worked in a nursing home, I came to appreciate this circle, if you will. I don't mean that's some new age idea. I just mean that we all come back to the beginning, right? There's something sad about it, to say it mildly. You study hard, you go to school for 12 to 20 years to prepare yourself for a full-time career and life, and in general, you're just looking to conquer the world. Soon you're married, but then you must work hard to pay off your college loans. Somewhere in there, a baby emerges, and you then work hard to put them through school. When they are through, then you scramble to prepare for retirement, and then you retire. But then, if And when you should have acquired enough funds throughout your lifetime, you finally get to go on that Caribbean cruise that you've always dreamed of. As one put it, you can't eat half the stuff on the menu any longer. You can't be far from a bathroom, and you have to be careful because, well, you could break or strain something. Thus may, and only the young will laugh. Thus may many either for safety or lack of money or fear stay home where one day they will die. That is, unless their children make them leave and go to another, a home. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Second reason life is meaningless is the vanity of wisdom. You read about this in verses 12 to 18, chapter 1. I, the preacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. And I set my heart to seek and search out by wisdom concerning all that is done under heaven, this burdensome task God has given to the sons of man, by which they may be exercised. I have seen all the works that are done under the sun, and indeed all is vanity, grasping for the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight. What is lacking cannot be numbered. I communed with my heart, saying, look, I have attained greatness and have gained more wisdom than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My heart has understood great wisdom and knowledge, and I set my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this also is grasping for the wind. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So yes, many go after that 12 years of schooling to go for more schooling. I think that's great. College is viewed by many as a means to not only acquire greater knowledge, but as a means of acquiring a higher paying job. Yet it's said that most college graduates work for individuals who never even earned a college degree. How's that fair? Right? We often think that if we can just earn a little more, if we can just develop something new, then maybe we will find greater happiness. But with all the gains in technology, our lives have just simply grown more complex. The statement is true that the more you know, the more you don't know. And I'm not arguing for ignorance here. I'm not arguing for lack of education. I'm simply saying there's something akin to a vapor in all this. It troubles us, and yet we are at a loss as to how to fix the matter, no matter how hard we try. The more we acquire in knowledge, the more problems we seem to inherit. Consider how it all began in the Garden of Eden. Eve found herself sitting at the tree of the what? The knowledge of good and evil. When she was promised more knowledge, she desired it. She accepted it. Did she receive greater knowledge? Yes. Now she knew of both good and evil. Yet this evil only corrupted man's wisdom, so that with each new invention or development in knowledge, it only created a new set of problems that frustrated mankind. Wisdom is never complete. We grasp for it, but we'll never, ever have it all figured out. Solomon said in chapter 7, verse 23 of Ecclesiastes, all this I have proved by wisdom. I said I will be wise, but it was far from me. Thus Solomon concludes the search for wisdom in and of itself by saying, but vanity. It's vapor, smoke, it's elusive. You can't contain it. A third reason why life is meaningless is the vanity of wealth. So we've talked, about the monotony of life, the elusiveness of wisdom, and the futility or the vanity of wealth. How often we say, well, let's look at it in verses 1 to 11. Ecclesiastes 2. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with myrrh, therefore enjoy pleasure. But surely this also was vanity. I said of laughter, madness, and of myrrh, what does it accomplish? I searched in my heart how to gratify my flesh with wine, while guiding my heart with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men to do under all the days of their lives. I made my work great. I built my houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards, and I planted all kinds of fruit trees in them. I made myself water pools from which to water the growing trees of the grove. I acquired male and female servants and had servants born in my house. Yes, I had greater possessions of herds and flocks than all who were in Jerusalem before me. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the special treasures of kings and of provinces. I acquired male and female singers, the delights of the sons of men, and musical instruments of all kinds. So I became great, and I excelled more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my reward from all my labor. Then I looked at all the works that my hands had done, and on the labor in which I had toiled, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. There was no profit under the sun. How often we say, if only I could acquire this or that, then life would be so much more pleasant. We think we would be satisfied if only we could have that house or that motor home like so-and-so has, or that boat. It's a maddening disease, the desire for wealth. And while we grow mature in our speech and the way we present these ideas, we still have this inner notion that this or that place or that position would somehow bring greater happiness. But with each acquisition, we only desire more. Solomon had it all, and he still wasn't satisfied. In Ecclesiastes 6:1, Solomon states that God gives man good gifts. Why doesn't he enable him to enjoy them? Let's put it this way. How many of you have driven through the neighborhoods of the rich and famous? Tina and I, we've even gone to Beverly Hills to just see what it was like to drive through Beverly Hills. The oversized homes with manicured yards, everything seems to be in place. It all looks so perfect until you walk inside. Far too many of these perfect-looking homes are simply broken inside. Evidently, a family can acquire it all. They can amass it and make it look good and even put gates about it. But inside, it doesn't ensure happiness. Warren Wiersbe, in his book, Be Satisfied, writes, "It is good to have the things that money can buy, provided you don't lose the things that money can't buy." When will we ever learn that money doesn't hold the answer to life's happiness? We may profess it, but do we live it? I was driving home some time back when I noticed a modest brick home with a U-Haul in front. I didn't know if they were moving all their possessions or not, but I noted that the U-Haul wasn't all that big. But it made me ponder my story, and it would do the same for you. If you think about it, we spend a great deal of, now think about this, we spend a great deal of time going and coming from our homes, don't we? We go to work, we go shopping. And if you were to look, most people have these garage things that open up and shut and you never see them. But if you could watch and you were to tally, you would note that day after day, week after week, they come and they go, they come and they go, and when they come, they often have something in their arms. And this happens week after week, month after month, year after year, until it's time to move. And then a bigger truck comes than the one that came the first time, right? Until it becomes something of a curse, and people talk about it, and then they grow old, and then they loathe what it is that they have around them, and they worry, and they wonder, what am I going to do with all this stuff? And the kids don't want it because it looks dated, or it is dated, and so it goes to Samaritan Center. Right? And then churches gather to help move the stuff from here to there. Right? People help us get started with a wedding shower, and then from year to year, we just keep adding. gadgets, clothes, appliances, books, furniture, equipment of various kinds, you name it. It's all come to our house one trip at a time. If you've ever walked around an amusement park or some place where everybody's come to just have fun, to be entertained, you will typically find that it doesn't work. It doesn't seem to. Studies show that most of the day spent at these so-called places of entertainment are spent waiting in line. Pay all that money, over $100, and you wait in line. And because of a few cheap thrills, you go home and you act like that was a grand vacation. When in reality, if you were to measure your time and the time spent carefully, you would note that most of your time was spent waiting. And you know what? If you were to peruse and walk through such a park, you would find that many of the kids are crying. Right? And parents are bent down and jerking the arm and saying, now stop that. Right? You know, in the happy place. It's real. Money doesn't ensure happiness. Strange how some lessons are so hard to learn. Fourth reason why life is so meaningless, according to the preacher, is the certainty of death. Are you depressed yet? This is inspired writings, okay? This is here for a reason. Solomon is building his case. Let us hear. Notice verse 12. Then I turned myself to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who succeeds the king? Only that what he has already done. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly, as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceive that the same event happens to them all. So I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart, this also is vanity. For there is no more remembrance of the wise than of the fool forever, since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because what was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who come after me. It's been said that death keeps such sloppy appointments, doesn't it? I stood, and I share this often, but it's the story I know best. I stood at the foot of my twin's grave. My mind replayed those horrific moments of December 2, 2004. To call your mom and tell her the plane went down, to hear those words. It's sad, it's hard, but you get used to the idea. The shock of it all sends chills down the spine as the reality tries to settle in. It's so unnatural. 29 years old, he was about to be ordained as an elder in his local church. He was beginning to start a family with his wife. He was making arrangements for Christmas get-togethers. We talked about it that morning. And yet in the midst of work for Jesus, he climbs aboard a Cessna 421, having carefully seen to it that the calendars that he had designed for the pastors of which he was going to see, of which one was me, are loaded safely in the nose of that plane. They shared together in a word of prayer, and then after buckling up, experienced the familiar force of takeoff there at the Collegedale Airport. Within seconds, they are put into a state of panic as the right engine mysteriously quits, and quickly they descend into a forest of trees right there off Pine Hill Road. In seconds, all but one lies still on a cold, damp forest floor. Why? I don't know. In fact, this church itself has gone through the same loss. Most of you know somebody who had COVID and died. We had one at Greenville, young man, a twin. Both his twins get together for lunch, for a weekend for business, and they have supper together. The next day, the one twin gets sick. The other twin anticipates, I'm going to get sick too because I just spent time with my twin. And so he does. He gets sick. The one twin goes home, gets better. The other twin goes to the hospital and dies. And I meet with the mother as she calls me in the morning hours around 4 a.m. And I meet her at the emergency room, and we get there just in time to see the body rolled into ER. And I see as the mother steps out of her car and can't even stand up completely without falling to the ground in that darkness of morning. And she cries out to God, begging for her son to live. We go to the waiting room. I sit there with the wife, and I sit there with the mother and the father, and we receive the word that they're doing all that they can, and then in a few moments later, the nurse comes in, and we did all that we could. It doesn't seem fair, doesn't it? Does it? Walk into, 41 was he? Because here's the deal. These young men, people you know, they had their life ahead of them. Yeah, vanity, but they had their life ahead of them. But walk into a nursing home, and you will inevitably find someone who wants to die, who sits and stares out a window. No family to come and see them anymore. No memory of what used to be is even there. They simply sit with a blank stare out the window, watching as other people go about their busy lives. Like they're a vase on a pedestal, like they're just a piece in the home. Because no one cares to stop. Nobody would say it, but so many act out such a thought. They simply sit. A story unread. With a blank stare out the window. As one preacher put it, it seems as though death has seemed to lost their address. Meanwhile, we placed roses on Jamie's grave, roses that he had helped plant, that he had helped tend, and we covered his casket with dirt. Not only is he gone, but with time, most will seldom ever think of him, and give him enough time, your grandchildren, maybe, your great-grandchildren, possibly, great-great-grandchildren, maybe a handful of times. Your story, too, give enough time, will most likely be forgotten. Does it bother you? We work hard to build a reputation. We receive letters and telephone calls. We try to assist others with life, and yet within months after our death, people are already trying to put thoughts of you out of their minds so that they can move on without pain. So that they won't repeatedly be touched by it. Yes, they appreciated you. Yes, but life moves on, and it must. All of us have a story, yet the day is coming when each of us here, unless Jesus comes first, will find our story coming to an end. As one put it, where most of the pages are in your left hand, but just a thin wisp in the right. The book will be closed. Your biography will be added to the large library of history, yet fewer and fewer will look at it as time gets busy and time marches on. I heard the point made recently that everyone with the exception of 2 died in this book. You know that, right? Everybody but 2 died in this book. And you will too if he doesn't come first. So what does one do with all that? Thoroughly depressed? Seems as though this ancient king has made a pretty good case regarding the vanity of life. Is he right? Is God trying to tell us something here? Why is it in our Bibles? That's just the first 2 chapters. Read the rest, and you'll get the point. Remember when we started that we noted that all is vanity, but where? under the sun. The wise preacher said that it was all vanity that was under the sun. He refers to life under the sun throughout the book. Even when he speaks of death, he does so only from the perspective of life under the sun. Notice Ecclesiastes 9, 5, and 6. I trust you all know this. This is a very well-used passage. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. For they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. Also their love, their hatred, and their envy have now perished. Nevermore will they have a share in anything done under the sun. So evidently those who perish don't remember, don't know. The hope of the resurrection is not mentioned here. Why? Because from the perspective of life under the sun, it's what's being given. And it renders, from that vantage point, an appearance of meaninglessness, of vapor, of smoke. When one never lifts their head up, there is nothing at all but despair. But the king paints this despairing picture for a reason. Not so that we will give up, not so that we'll throw the towel in, but so that we will look up. You see, by saying life under the sun, it implies that there is a place where there is not vanity of vanities. Right? If he just said all is vanity and never qualified, it would be really bad. But he qualifies it by stating where this is the case. And it's only the case under the sun. Amen? He wants us to look way beyond the blue, up to the one who offers meaning to this seeming meaningless state we find ourselves in. I want you to notice that in chapter 3, verse 11, it says that he has made everything beautiful in its time. And also, he has put eternity into their hearts. God directs our minds to a bigger picture. Let's face it, why is it we hate death so? Why is it we are so disturbed by the fact that our story is so short? It's because there's an eternity placed within our hearts, this instinct that is contrary to everything that we see, but we know, we sense, we know that somebody put it here. Amen? We may not understand everything about the story we find ourselves in, but that's okay, because if we know the author, that's enough. You see, everything that is all of creation, of which is found under the sun, is subject to vanity because of sin. At least that's what Paul says in Romans 8:20. He says, for the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it in hope. God is sovereign and offers meaning in our seemingly meaningless situation. Notice Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. God offers purpose. He gives meaning. And so we are invited to turn our hearts heavenward, beyond the sun to the Son of God himself. But what are we to do now with the stuff of life? Are we to be so heavenly minded that we are no earthly good? What are we to do to make of all that comes our way in this story we find ourselves a part of for this time? Solomon says, enjoy life. I want you to notice chapter 2. Again, 1 and 2 is sort of a microcosm of the entire book. And I want you to notice verse 24. He's wrapping up his case, his introduction, if you will. And he states in verse 24 what he will be the common refrain after going through each of these points. 1, 2, 3, 4. You know, whether it's wisdom, the folly of it, or the vanity of it, whether it's wealth, whether it's the seeming meaninglessness of life, or whether it's death itself. All of these rendering life somewhat meaningless. But each time at the end of that, he gives a refrain, and he talks about the happiness that we should have. And then he brings it together at the end. But I want you to notice how he does it in verse 24 of chapter 2. He says, nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was what? From the hand of God. Now, don't think that this is eat, drink, and tomorrow we die type thinking. That's not the case. Far from it. This is not some type of feudalism. This is the reason we can have joy and we can have happiness. Why? Because it is a gift. If you try, we hear all the time this notion of righteousness by faith, recognizing that we cannot attain it by ourselves, right? As much as I try to work for it, as much as I try to get educated for it, as much as I try to acquire or position myself, I cannot get right before God without simply saying yes to him and letting him make me right. Why should happiness be any different? In other words, I am not suggesting what some in this latest generation seem to be implying, that if I just watch enough YouTube and, fix my hair just right, and get the right camera angle, I might get a following and have wealth and fame and be an influencer. Right? It's happening out there. There's lots of kids home watching YouTube thinking they're going to be the next rich one. No, there's work to be done under the sun. Amen? It's hard work. So we're not talking about ignorance. We're not talking about laziness. We're not talking about just sitting here and expecting the world to give it to me. What we are saying, though, is that when we say yes to God with all our known choices, you knew I'd have to get that in there, amen? That he will take us on a path. He will write a story for us that is so engaging that when we wake up each day and we receive our direction, we will receive it as a gift from God. And when we receive the gift from God, trusting it in as his will, then we can relax and trust him with our happiness. This is not some philosophy. This is not some type of, sweet quote that you read in a card from Hallmark. This is what the preacher said. He had it all. He had all the wealth, women, fame, wisdom. And he said, here's the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. Right? In other words, just do what he says, trust him, and receive the gift of happiness that comes with it. And when you receive it as a gift and you don't work for it, there will be a contentment and a reality that is so unlike the vapor of which Solomon speaks. Yes, we're to savor life as a gift from God. That means only it is as God would have you to enjoy it. Solomon met with sadness and despair because of his effort, his work to enjoy life aside from God. Whenever you change the will of God, you are turning his gift into works. You say, well, this is what God asked me to do. He wants me to worship on this day or eat this way. Or you understand what I'm saying? All these things. God is getting into my business. All I can say is, the wise preacher said, receive it as a gift from God. Receive his law. Receive his instruction. And be happy. You won't earn it. You won't be able to develop it. But if you'll just say yes to him, it just happens. Can I get an amen? The lesson here in Ecclesiastes is if you want to enjoy life, if you want to eat, drink, and be merry, then do it according to God's will. And the aged preacher who had all the luxury and wealth that the world could afford says, listen, I know, I've been there. God's way is the only way to happiness. If only Solomon had rested in God's promise to provide only the wisdom, not only the wisdom, but the wealth and honor as he had promised, he would have enjoyed life as it was meant to be enjoyed. And it is in Solomon's reign that you see what could have been for Israel. For there was a point in Solomon's reign where the Queen of Sheba comes over and is so admiring and is giving to God the glory. And we see what was just the beginning of a bright future for Israel until Solomon edited the instructions and followed his way instead. And for the Christian, most of his arguments are insignificant because we look to a life beyond the sun. It's okay with Christians that there's nothing new under the sun. While the sun rises and sets every day and the wind continually blows and the waters follow their given path, we know that we serve a God who is in control. After all, did he not hold the sun in place so Joshua could finish an important battle? And he moved the sun back as a sign to King Hezekiah. He opened the Red Sea and the Jordan River for Israel. He turned off the rain for Elijah, and then he came back and he turned it back on for Elijah. He calmed the wind, he calmed the waves for his disciples. My God is in control. For the Christian, he or she is okay with the fact that wisdom can never be fully attained. It's a gift. For we serve a God who is all-knowing. For the Christian, he or she is okay with the fact that wealth is fleeting, that it may eventually end up in the hands of a fool after we are gone. For we know that God has built mansions in heaven, and that we will one day walk on streets of gold, and that he owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. So we're okay. For the Christian, he or she is okay with the fact that life will eventually end in death. For we know that for those in Christ, such a death is but a sleep, and that we will soon awaken until eternal life. So yes, we cry, yes, we hate that we will not see them for many days or years, but we know that joy cometh in the morning. You see, greed imprisons a man. It renders life meaningless. But give your life to God and follow in his path, and life gains meaning and peace. Hence, we find the conclusion of the matter. Notice the words of Ecclesiastes 12:13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. God's people today, living in the earth's final hours, will be found following these words of Solomon. For does John not tell us in John 14:12, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they who what? Keep the commandments and have the faith of Jesus. Does not the first angel tell us to fear God? Give him glory. To give him glory is to have Jesus in your heart. And thus the law will be written there. It's a story told in Reader's Digest that I would like to conclude with this morning. It says, one morning I watched a couple of cow punchers going out to bring in a wild steer from his range in the mountains. They took along one of those shaggy little gray donkeys, a burro. Now a big 3-year-old steer that's been running loose in the timber is a tough customer to handle. But those cowboys had the technique. They got a rope on the steer and then they tied him neck and neck right up close to that burro. When they let go, that burro had a bad time. The steer threw him all over the place. He banged him against trees and rocks, into bushes. Time after time, they both went down, but there was one great difference between the burro and the steer. The burro had an idea. He wanted to go home. And no matter how often the steer threw him, every time the burro got to his feet, he took a step nearer the corral. This went on and on. And after about a week, the burro showed up at ranch headquarters. And he had with him the tamest and sorriest looking steer you ever did see. Please hear me carefully. This world might throw you for a loop. Amen? You might get knocked around a bit, beat up a bit. But if you'll persistently keep your focus on him, insisting on time with him each day, no matter your schedule, then this life won't be in vain, for it will be but the introduction of life eternal. For given enough time, you'll find yourself home. And Pathfinders, and the rest of you here, I leave you with this challenge. Look up.